Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven, and I am the host, coming to you live on a Saturday afternoon. Joining me, as always, is my guy, Tyler. Tyler, what's up, man? How you doing today?
Doing great, man. This upcoming game is definitely not what I thought it was going to be at the start of the season. We figured it'd be this big New York primetime, Aaron Rodgers, Justin Herbert, two playoff teams kind of matchup. And it's not quite that. They might be two teams that are trying to gun for the playoffs, but very different points than I think that either of us thought they would be at this point in the season.
Yeah, certainly from a Jets standpoint, obviously a lot of big changes. You know, they were not necessarily the favorites to win the AFC East, but people thought that they could challenge them, heading into the season. I feel like people trusted them more than they trusted the Dolphins, and now the Dolphins are probably winning the AFC East. So certainly shows how much things can change throughout the course of the season. So lot to get into today. We'll have some final thoughts on this game. We'll have our usual picks, and then we'll get some questions. We appreciate the flexibility today. Both Tyler and I had some stuff going on this morning, so we decided to roll it out at 4 p.m. So hopefully you guys are enjoying your Saturday. Hopefully your teams from the college standpoint at least covered. I know Alex is always into good teams covering, so hopefully you guys' teams are doing well, and should be a fun rest of the evening tonight.
Yes, should be. Yeah, 4:00 on a Saturday. Don't remember the last time we did that. We've definitely done some odd time streams before, but that's like draft or emergency stuff or whatever. But not on a Saturday. But it's different. Maybe that changes things. Maybe we are the event, the butterfly effect that kicks off the winning record for the Chargers the rest of the way. Like it took us recording at 4 p.m. and that just changed something in the world. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. We've done like 9 p.m. when both of us have like after school events or something like on a Tuesday, but Saturday we've been pretty consistently 9 or 10 a.m. So we'll see what happens today. So like I mentioned, if you have some questions for us, we'll get to those later on. We already see a super chat from Miss Shun. Appreciate it as always. And we'll get into some stuff today. So first and foremost, have to do our injury report roundup. The big one for the Chargers, obviously, is Mr. Josh Palmer being ruled out. He did not practice this week at all, which was not too dissimilar from last week, but ultimately he was ruled kind of as a game time decision. He played, re-aggravated his knee injury. I believe it was the same knee injury. And so he is out this week. I've been told that this injury likely keeps him out for next week against the Lions as well. So this is a bit of a hit to the Chargers. Obviously, on Monday night against this Jets secondary, you wish that this group would be healthy. It would have been a ton of fun to have Mike Williams, Josh Palmer, Quentin Johnson, kind of running into form against this Jets secondary, but that is obviously not the case here. So Tyler, now that we know that Josh Palmer is out, what are you looking for in terms of overcompensating for that loss against this arguably best secondary in the league, Jets defense?
I think they're going to have to search for, if Keenan Allen can't win his one-on-ones, which I don't expect him to all the time. It's going to be very tough for Keenan. I expect them to look for the easy buttons, but I actually don't think that's going to be as much Quentin Johnston. And I only say that because I'm not entirely sure. I cannot fully sit here and say and guarantee that he's actually a part of their game plan moving forward. Even though we saw it increase last week, it felt out of necessity and not out of intention, really, because he didn't get a single target until the second quarter. He got them all basically on the one drive, and then he wasn't targeted again until the fourth quarter with like 8 minutes left. And it was 1 third down conversion, and it was great. Like what he did with his targets was great, but it didn't really feel like there was intention there. I think against this defense especially, and trying to get things out quickly and potentially to test their run defense or whatever they got, I actually think Darius Davis gets much more involved this game. Now, could it be Quentin Johnston? Sure. It could be. Maybe it even should be. But I can't sit here again and say that that's for sure going to happen. I think this is a game where Darius Davis gets involved early, and I think they just spread out the touches here and there and everywhere and get things going, because I just don't think, unless Jaylen Guyton comes back and is fully healthy and amazing, and even then against the secondary, I'm not sure. I think they're going to have to lean into some of the special guys in terms of what they've been leaning into early on this season. Someone like Darius Davis, maybe even Gerald Everett with Yak. I don't know that that's Quentin Johnson. I'd like to say that it is, but I don't think anyone could look me in the eyes and say, yeah, for sure, he's going to get 10 targets and be routinely involved and be a focal point of this offense. I don't buy it yet.
The one thing I definitely don't buy is kind of like the back shoulder stuff that's been kind of like his staple so far this season. Um, the Jets have easily the best outside cornerback duo in the league, and you throw Michael Carter as well, who's an outstanding slot corner. I'm not expecting a ton of like, you know, X receiver, back shoulder fade, goal line fade kind of targets for Quentin Johnson this week. I think if you're going to get him involved, you have to do some kind of shallow crossers, slants, maybe some deep overs from play action when the Jets are in zone. But this is a very tough matchup for Quentin, and would be a tough matchup for Josh Palmer because this Jets secondary duo is just so fantastic. I am curious to see what kind of happens with Quentin's role from a yak standpoint with Gerald Everett back, which is definitely something else that we can talk about because he does not have an injury designation this week. So you get Gerald Everett back. What does that do for Quentin's role? And if this is another 3 targets and 1 catch and 15 yards, like what? Like I think we're just potentially going back to the drawing board here with Quentin Johnson, which would be really frustrating. I'm hopeful that like last week was a way for them to build on finding him a specific role. You know, the shallow crosser role is so perfect for him. I would love to see him get involved, maybe some deep overs, things like that. But the typical like X role this week, I think is basically non-existent because this Jets cornerback duo is fantastic. Regarding Keenan Allen's role here, you highlighted on Thursday the key matchup, which is the right key matchup, which is Keenan versus Michael Carter. Combined, DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner have 8 slot snaps this year. Like those two do not go into the slot. And everybody online is talking about like Keenan versus Sauce Gardner and all that. And they're not even mentioning like Michael Carter at all. So like Keenan Allen, I think this is a game where you want him like almost exclusively in the slot, like because Michael Carter is definitely the weakest of the 3. He's still a fantastic slot corner, but I'm without Josh Palmer, without Mike Williams, I'm keeping Keenan in the slot as much as possible, and I think that's a way for him to, you know, create some positive outcomes for this Chargers team, and they're going to need it. He's also 70 yards short of 10,000 career yards, so I'm sure he's very motivated to come out and have a good game. But to me, if I'm the Chargers, I am putting him in the slot as much as possible because that is probably where I feel best about him producing, and the offense needs it because you don't have your full cast of weapons. So to me, you know, everybody's talking about Keenan versus Sauce Gardner. We might see it like a small handful of times. You rightly highlighted Keenan versus Michael Carter, and to me, that's where I'm leaning with Keenan. This is probably like an 80% of his snaps should come from the slot this week because it's just their best path forward of creating offense.
Yeah, it shouldn't be, okay, well, we don't have Mike Williams. We don't have Josh Palmer. Therefore, Keenan Allen is our next X guy. So let's just send him out wide and do that with him. That really should not be the role. It should be, if you're a smart coordinator, how do we get him away from Sauce Gardner? That basically should be the game. Motion him, move him, whatever, in the slot, like you said. Do that. That's not even a slight on Keenan Allen. He's also just really good at that. I don't know if the discussion around Sauce Gardner versus Keenan Allen is just because they're the 2 best on their team, or because we've seen so many of these, you know, stutter and goes or whatever from Keenan, and therefore everyone assumes that he's an outside guy because he's done some of that. And yes, he's done some great things this year as that guy. But no, like you said, keep him in the slot. If he can function and have a solid game, heck, even the 70 yards that he needs, if he can get 70 yards, like this team might win because that might all be all you need in this game, especially if you can run effectively and if anybody else can do anything else. So yeah, if he can get the 70 yards, get to 10,000 on prime time in New York, Monday Night Football, get to 10,000 receiving yards, that'd be huge for this team. I think he can do it. And if Keenan Allen can have a good game, this game I think is a wrap. I just don't believe we'll see about the defensive injuries because that is a thing today all of a sudden.
Yeah.
But I think that given their opponent on offense, if Keenan can do his thing and perform well and work in the slot, I think the Chargers have a really good chance.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens there. Everybody's talking about the wrong matchup, I think, though, regarding Keenan Allen. I think you want him in the slot. And He takes about 62% of his snaps from the slot this year, which is a slight decrease from the previous 2 years under Joe Lombardi. I think the idea heading into the season was like you have more interchangeable pieces with him and Mike Williams. Now, without Mike Williams and without Josh Palmer, I think you want to really focus in on Keenan in the slot going forward. After that, obviously, we have to talk about Jaylen Guyton, and we'll see what happens officially. He has participated as a full listing the last 2 weeks of practice. It sounds like he is going to be activated. It also sounds like Otito Ogbonia is going to be activated. The Chargers officially do not have to do that until tomorrow because of Monday Night Football. That being said, I'm not expecting Jaylen Guyton to play a ton. This is his first game back after an ACL tear. So even with Josh Palmer out this week, I think we'll see a pretty heavy rotation of the other guys. You mentioned Darius Davis. Simi Fehoko will also get some burn. I think Jaylen Guyton gets some burn. For what it's worth, I think they keep Darius Davis in kind of that gadget role. After Josh Palmer got injured on Sunday Night Football against the Bears, it was that trio of Keenan, Quentin Johnston, and Simi Fehoko as kind of their main 3 receivers and 11 personnel. And I think we'll see Jaylen Guyton maybe play like 15, 20 snaps on Monday night. I don't think that they're going to give him a full workload right away. But what are your thoughts there from a rotation standpoint outside of Keenan and Quentin?
No, I think you're right there. I don't know how much Jaylen Guyton will be involved. The good news is if all he does is run conditioning tests and get himself ramped up for the future weeks, that's actually kind of a good thing. Like the Chargers could certainly use that as a role, especially with Quentin not being wide receiver too. So I think that's actually a fine thing for him. I'm not expecting him to be your possession receiver or your yak guy or get him 10 targets or anything. I don't expect that. Nor would I expect that even if you were really healthy. But I think that role would be just fine for him. There's definitely an aspect of, okay, who loses out or what changes because Jaylen Guyton is now the downfield guy. Now, granted, like you said, he can't do it every snap. He's not going to be 100% healthy and 100% snaps. So what changes? Because there's so many moving parts. You mentioned Gerald Everett. So, okay, let's say Quentin Johnston doesn't have to do the deep stuff anymore. So now he can work on the yak stuff, which he started to do last week. But will he do the yak stuff still if Gerald Everett's back? Because Gerald Everett has been more of their yak guy so far. And I think is like by far ahead of everybody else in terms of yards after the catch, at least per reception. I think I could be wrong. So how
among tight ends, right?
That, and I think on the team, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, yeah. I thought you were saying specifically for his position, but yes, on the team also.
Yeah. So I don't know how much Jaylen Guyton will do. I don't think it'll be a lot. But the good news is we know like Jaylen Guyton is on this team for 1.5 reasons. Half the reason is because he's talented. The real reason he's still on this team is because Justin Herbert trusts him implicitly. Like he 100% believes that Jaylen Guyton is someone that he can trust to do these certain things. In different parts of different seasons, he was the go-to guy in 4th down over someone like Mike Williams. Obviously, we've seen him throw it. The best throw we've ever seen potentially is to Jaylen Guyton. His first touchdown is to Jaylen Guyton against the Bucks. It was Jaylen Guyton. Jesse Bates is the safety, high-paid safety for the Bengals, or not at the time. He just threw it up for Jaylen Guyton, and Guyton came down with it. That's something that, well, for all the talk about chemistry between Herbert and Johnston, for Herbert and Guyton, it was like that. And same for Tyron Johnson, but that's a whole other thing. Just the good news is, while Guyton does not have, maybe the playbook completely down, one, I think there's enough overlap, and two, I don't think the role is all that complicated for him specifically. And 3, the chemistry is there. It's like good to go. So whenever he's good to go, I think they could get one maybe chunk play in there. And that would make the difference in this game. Keenan Allen being good, Guyton getting 130-yarder, getting them in field goal range, that legitimately could change this game. So whatever the role is, it won't be huge, but I think it'll be something that just helps them just a little bit.
And I do think this is best for the room too, because I think Quentin can stretch the field, but it's not what you drafted him for. It's not his best asset, and he never did it at TCU. So Jaylen Guyton coming in here is, even if it's just 15 plays, I think it helps just kind of alleviate some pressure and puts Quentin more into his actual role. So I think that helps for sure. Sebastian Joseph-Day put on an injury report today with an illness. Brandon Staley didn't sound too concerned about him playing but he is on there. The interesting one is Kenneth Murray, who was a late add to the injury report as of Thursday. He's dealing with a shoulder injury, officially limited in practice the last 2 days, and is tagged as questionable, which generally means you're about a game time decision. This is obviously notable because Kenneth Murray has had an issue with his shoulder previously, and he, has had shoulder surgery, and so we'll see what happens there. This is a game where the Chargers linebackers are super important to me because of Breece Hall and what he is really capable of. Arjun had that graphic, I think it was on Thursday, about running backs who run most often or least often into the designed gap where the run is supposed to go. And Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker are like the two backs that do it the least amount of times, because Breece Hall is just always looking for that cutback lane. So the linebackers to me are super important, and Kenneth Murray has been playing well here. What do you make of that injury, Tyler? Do you think he plays? And if not, what do you think kind of is the results of that injury?
That's a big one. And it's so strange. Even though we've been through this for a few weeks now, it is strange to consider Kenneth Murray potentially being out of a big injury.
Yeah.
I do have some faith. Obviously, it's a good thing, I guess, that we've seen Nick Niemann. I don't know if he's officially the guy that jumps in, because we've seen the replacement for Kendricks, not necessarily for Murray. I assume that's Niemann, but we never know. Or could be Deion Henley. But again, I doubt this. Seems too early. Seems too early still. It's really unfortunate. I mean, Breece Hall is exceptional, top 10 in the league in yards per route run. Just against the Giants, it took one play for him to basically win the game for them. Although it was very early on, that was like the only positive play on offense for them. But here's a dump off, 53 yards for a touchdown. No problem. Done.
Yeah.
And, we've even seen the Chargers give up something like that against the Cowboys. So you mentioned Eric Kendricks as being a big part of this game. Not having Kenneth Murray is kind of rough, honestly. And I even just think, just from an athletic standpoint, I think Nick Niemann's pretty athletic too. But just having Kenneth Murray as a guy who is athletic and can make those tackles, or at least get the range down, to lose him would be a bummer. I still think he plays. I think he's still available on Prize Picks as well, which they tend to be very cautious with those things. They tend to be like, as soon as someone is nicked up a bit, they're off. So if he's still on there, maybe there's something we don't know. I think he plays. I just think that the issue with really not just that injury, but all the little injuries, the illnesses, I think they'll all end up playing, but they're now, let's say, 10% worse off than they would have been if they were healthy, or 20% worse off, or whatever. They're limited. And I think that really is going to matter in a game where the running back you're facing, not Dalvin Cook, but the running back in Breece Hall that you're facing is the first guy in the league in rushing yards over expected per attempt, and just not be able to make that tackle, or just being slightly slower, or not be able to hold a gap or whatever. I think it's going to make the difference in this game. So that's definitely one to watch. I don't know how much better Breece Hall will do this game, but I just think that every little thing will count. And I think that every little injury is going to lead to him having a better day than if they were healthy.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Derwin mentioned this week that they're fully aware of the explosive play potential from the running back room. I think he was probably being a little too kind to his boy, Dalvin Cook, but we know what Breece Hall can do. We know that Breece Hall is a touchdown waiting to happen at any moment. And even like his first game post ACL, like I think against the Broncos, he hit like a 70-yard touchdown run. And like that rest of that game was a grind for them. But those plays matter a ton. And the Chargers have done a really good job of avoiding giving up those kind of home run runs, which was a huge problem in the past season. They're going to have to be on top of it this week. I am curious, in training camp, it was pretty clearly that like Amen Ogbongbemiga was the backup to Eric Kendricks, who at the time was the Mike linebacker. In training camp, Kendricks was the Mike, Kenneth Murray is the Will, and Amen and Niemann were their backups. And so Eric Kendricks goes down, and instead of putting in Amen, they put in Niemann and moved Kenneth Murray to the Mike. And so now if Kenneth Murray is out and Eric Kendricks has been kind of settling into this groove at the Will, what does that rotation look like? I would think that it would be easier for Amen to come in as the Mike and Kendricks to stay as the Will, but Niemann did play, and Niemann had at least some good moments against the Vikings and things like that. But I am curious to see what happens here. I don't think we'll see Dayon. I think they're going to continue to be very patient with him and have him focus on his special teams play. And he had a great special teams moment this past week. He knocked some gunner on his ass this past week against the Bears. It was awesome to watch on tape.
Yeah.
But I am curious to see if it's Neiman or if they keep Amon and put Amon at the mic this week.
So has Amon played at all? He has played. I mean, like
a little bit.
Defense.
They rotated a little bit the first game that Kendricks was out, and then against the Vikings it was like fully Nick Neiman, and then he's had some like spot duty rather than that, but it's mostly been Nick Neiman in play for the injuries.
So Deion Henley actually has more snaps than Amon this year by 7. It's 12-5, so whatever. It's basically nothing. But Neiman with 142. I think Neiman is also in this game. We'll see what the defense wants to do. We'll see what Staley wants to do. He's probably the guy they trust the most to blitz of all those 3 guys as well. So I think that just gets him on the field. You trust him more in coverage as well. So if it's not Murray, I think it's just Nick. But like you talked about, it's more of how they move those guys around than who.
Last injury thing I wanted to talk about. We obviously had a lot to cover here today. Like I mentioned earlier, I think the Otito activation is pretty clearly Chris Hinton. And then I would not expect Otito to play. I think Otito is activated and then is kept kind of as a healthy scratch. In terms of Jaylen Guyton being activated, obviously Josh Palmer's injury plays a role here. So who are you kind of expecting, or who would you peg as the guy to get cut once Jaylen Guyton is activated?
Yeah, I think if Simi Fehoko didn't catch a touchdown last week, I would maybe say him, because you look at the special team snaps and he had, I think, 0 last week, then either 7 the week before or 0. But it's basically he's had 7 special team snaps the last 3 weeks, and 2 of them were zeros. It was like 0-7-0 or something like that. Yeah. So if you're not contributing on special teams like I thought he was, because against the Raiders you saw him do that, then I don't know how much they want to do that. But I think,
well, it's interesting too, because when they activated Keelan Doss, like they deactivated Simi Fehoko, and I was like, okay, like I don't understand what's going on here.
Doss isn't signed, is he?
No, Doss is still on the practice squad.
Okay. I don't know. I think just Fehokos are destined to be the Lieutenant Dan's history of his family, where they all die in every war. I think they just always have to be cut. I think it's the destiny. So I think they're gonna cut Simi Fehoko. And they got a Billy Fehoko in the NFL too. So.
Oh my gosh, that was a good one, Tyler. That was a good one, man.
I don't know where I pulled that from. So I think Simi Fehoko will be cut. The only thing is, though, if Jaylen Guyton's literally only going to be activated or signed and activated, or not signed, activated to prevent him from going on full-term IR, but he's literally not ready to play yet. Like he's kind of pretty close, but maybe they think he'll only get like 5-10 snaps in there. Then yeah, they'll probably keep Simi Fehoko, cut Dotson.
Yeah, I that was really funny. But yeah, I think it's Dotson. I think we haven't seen him play. I think Simi at least like has that special teams potential. And Josh Palmer being injured. If Josh Palmer were healthy, I think we could have a more serious conversation about it being Fehoko as the cut man. But Palmer's not playing this week. I think you need that extra receiver. So I think it will be Dotson. All right, you guys. Let's get to our prize pick segment of the week here. And then we'll get into some of these other picks and predictions, and then take some questions. So, Tyler, who are your Chargers specific prize picks of the week this week?
Yeah, I'm looking at the running backs here, and we'll see. There's a very much so a what we want versus what happens. But Joshua Kelly is sitting at 21.5 rushing yards, and I just don't think the Chargers will ever be significantly down in this game. I don't think this is an issue where they have to suddenly pass it 50 times this game. I think you can lean on the run. And if you start to pay attention to where the numbers are going, if the team kind of, use their brain for half a second, they'd see that Kelly might deserve a few more rushing attempts. Now, does that mean that he runs for 40, 50 yards? No, but 21.5 rushing yards, I'll take the more there. Cameron Dicker, I think this is a game where you definitely don't feel like you have to go for it a lot. I felt that way last game against the Bears. So Cameron Dicker at 1.5 field goals, I'll take the more there. I just think that every field goal will count. They will not feel like they have to go for it on fourth down a ton. So I see Quentin Johnston here at 31.5 receiving yards. After everything I just said about him maybe not getting involved as a part of this offense, I don't feel as good about that one, so I'm going to pass on that one. But that is something I'm curious of what the chat thinks. Quentin Johnston, 31.5 receiving yards as a wide receiver too. Kenneth Murray, this is a big if on whether he plays, but I think at 6.5 tackles, I would take the more there, especially because it's an upper body shoulder injury thing. Now that could completely take him out of the game, entirely, but it's not like he cannot run as fast. It's like a lower body leg injury, hamstring, whatever. So him or Kendricks, I think you feel good about the more because everything's going to be in front of the Chargers this week, outside of a couple passes to Wilson.
Yeah, I think if Kenneth Murray doesn't play, you can definitely take the more on Eric Kendricks' tackle line as well. I think that's probably a good play as well. His is at 7.0. The one that to me I felt the best about is Austin Eckler's receiving line. I think it's 28.5. I just had it in front of me and then I closed my phone, which was dumb of me, but I think it was 28.5. I think with everything that we have talked about today, I think Austin Eckler is going to be much more involved. They were super intentional last week about making him a focal part of the receiving game, and I think that's kind of how they want to establish him going forward. So that's one I like quite a bit here. I am curious about your thoughts about Justin Herbert's line. As you pointed out this week, the line has decreased significantly since early on this week. I think it's at 245, or is it lower than that now?
It's currently at 256. Oh, sorry, that's just rushing yards. Sorry, 245.5 passing yards. That is getting more tempting. When it was 267, I admittedly went with less.
Yeah.
But at 245.5, if you gun to my head, what do you pick? I would still take the less there. I think that it's just a lot. And there's no Josh Palmer. Like even with Josh Palmer, maybe, but without Josh Palmer and no for sure understanding of how they work Quentin Johnston, Guyton's coming back but not sure, all those uncertainties, unless Austin Eckler rips off a few great receiving, catching after the catch sort of opportunities, I don't see them going over 245 passing yards. And I just don't even think they need to. It'd be great. If they do, they probably won that game.
Yeah.
I just don't think they need to.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think I am definitely more tempted with the more at that line than at 263 or whatever it was. 245, I still think you're maybe looking at like a 225 kind of passing yards game. That's kind of how I feel right now. But we'll see what happens there. As always, feel free and use the link prizepicks.com/guilty. Use the code guilty at checkout for a deposit match up to $100 at prizepicks.com. Super easy daily fantasy app. You simply choose more or less every single week. They have daily specials that you can combine certain aspects of college football, the NFL. You can take a NBA line if you're super into the NBA stuff going on right now. PrizePicks has it all for you. Last week there was a LeBron James and Justin Herbert special, so they have some great specials that you guys can go check out. And using that link and that code, prizepicks.com/guilty, code guilty, does truly help the show. So if you want to go and use that, that would be very much appreciated. And hey, man, you can go and win some money yourself. So appreciate that from here on out. All right, Tyler, let's get into our league-wide picks here, and then we'll take some questions. I see some interesting super chats that we'll have to get to here in a minute, but it is what it is. So far this week, so far this season, Tyler is rounding into form at 18-13. Sure. Argent also 18-13. Both Chase and Alex Insdorf at 20-11. I had a rough week last week, 16-15. And then Alex Katzen is bringing up the rears for now at 13-18. So reminder, we do this every single year. The losers have to pay for a jersey of the winner. And so far, Alex Insdorf is in the lead. So Arjun this week has the Saints over the Bears, the Dolphins over the Chiefs, and the Browns over the Cardinals. He also has the Jets winning this game 17-13. Alex Katzen has the Raiders as his favorite of the week, the Bills as his underdog of the week, and the Dolphins alongside Arjun as well. Alex Insdorf has the Baltimore Ravens as his favorite, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as his underdog. He's also going with the Saints over the Bears, and he also has the Jets winning 14-13. That being said, Tyler, who are your picks and what is your Chargers prediction?
Yeah, so I have the Cleveland Browns over the Arizona Cardinals. Good luck to Arizona. Kaiser White, you're awesome. If you look at Prize Picks, I think it's like basically just their defense is what's available on Prize Picks, and that's basically it. Kaiser White set it, I think, like 8.5 tackles, so I guess he's having a good season. Buffalo over Cincinnati, got to pick one good team to beat the other good team. There's a lot of really good head-to-head matchups this week, so I felt, I don't know if confidence the right word, but Buffalo over Cincinnati, good quarterback, good team. Atlanta over Minnesota. I didn't want to take like another easier one, I guess. So the ugly Atlanta Falcons versus Minnesota game, probably not the most fun thing to watch, but I'm sure, Bijan will get 1 or 20 carries in that game. And then as far as the Chargers, it's so tough with Josh Palmer out. That really does make me really dislike this game quite a bit more for the Chargers. I just, with the Jets not being a good offense, like at all, and their offensive line, now Tippmann's coming back, so that helps, but their offensive line is complete shite right now, and Zach Wilson is not great, and we just saw what they did last week. I understand that this the Chargers defense they're facing. I understand that they could also give up 28 points in about 4 seconds, but I just don't believe in the Jets, and I think that for the Chargers, when there's a coaching advantage or disadvantage, I should say, let's say the Patriots, we'll see, but Dan Campbell next week, John Harbaugh the next week or the following week, those kind of matchups, I won't pick the Chargers to win. While I do believe Robert Saleh has done a much better job with his defense than Brandon Staley has done with this defense, I think that it's not like a clear cut and obvious by far coaching advantage like an Andy Reid, like a Harbaugh, etc. And then obviously the other reason is it's Herbert and it's Wilson. And I just think that Herbert will be able to do enough. And I don't know that Wilson will be able to do as much. And I think Wilson will spot you a sack that knocks you out of field goal range, potentially an interception, a fumble, you name it. Like, I just think the Chargers can make things snowball for a quarterback sometimes. That's not great. Tyson Bagent last week started with one great throw, and then it just really never worked for him after that. 2 interceptions in that game as well. So I think the Chargers will do enough. It'll be ugly, and anyone picking like 24 points or for them to maintain their points per game this week, I don't believe you at all. But I'm gonna have the Chargers winning, and I'm gonna have them winning to a nice ugly. Let's go 17-14. I think it comes down to a primetime Cameron Dicker field goal. Herbert gets it done in the 4th quarter.
Yeah, I feel like I have a lot of the same thoughts here, and we didn't talk about the Jets injury report, but Joe Tippmann is back, their 2nd-round pick out of Wisconsin. He's played right guard mostly for them, but he is a natural center, so it is going to be interesting to see what the Jets decide to do along the offensive line. If they don't play Tippmann at center and he plays right guard, then that means the technically 4th-string center will be starting for them. If Tippmann plays center, then Billy Turner, who has this past week of guard experience, he's been an offensive tackle for most of his career. He's been a swing tackle, so he's played on both sides, but he's never been a true like full-time guard. And then Max Mitchell, who we all kind of liked in the draft as a potential like swing tackle of the future guy, he's going to be their starting right tackle. So the Chargers defense is not good. They're not like a top 10 defense by any means, but I think the strength of the Chargers defense is very clearly their defensive line. Joey Bosa is rounding into form. We've seen Thule and Khalil each dominate some games. We've seen Morgan Fox have his moments. I think that the Chargers defensive line basically by themselves is enough to kind of keep this Jets offense at bay. So really, what does this come down to? This comes down to how much do I trust Justin Herbert versus an elite passing defense? And I don't trust him to put up a huge amount of numbers, but I trust him definitely more than I trust Zach Wilson. So I also think this is going to be a low scoring game. I think this is a really tough spot for these kind of injuries at the receiver room. Gerald Everett is playing, but he's definitely not healthy. The Chargers run game has not been going. So this is not going to be a super pretty game, but if the Chargers can get out to like a 10-0 lead, I feel like that's kind of enough. And then you can, scrape together some drives in the second half and call it good. So I think Kellen Moore, Justin Herbert will have enough to get this win, even though I think it is going to be ugly. So to be a little bit different here, I'm going to say the Chargers win 16-13. So I think low scoring like you do, but I'll say one less touchdown than you. So like I'm literally picking like one touchdown and 3 field goals kind of game for the Chargers.
Yeah, and I think that it's so tough with Josh Palmer out. That's the one that keeps giving me the hold up there. I think probably Alex picks a win for the Chargers if Palmer plays. I know you're in the chat, Alex. So I'm just curious if you would. The title of the video for this live stream is "Can the Chargers defense rise to the occasion?" So far, it looks like we all believe that that'll be the case. The most they have. So is it Alex Katzen that has the Jets scoring the quote unquote most at 17?
Yeah, 17 would be the most. Yep.
Yeah, which is
Arjun also has 17.
Oh, because they won. Yeah, thanks, Arjun. Yeah. That's fine. Arjun picked the Bears to win last week, so I don't care about his. He's not credible anymore. Although I guess if anybody knows the Jets, it is Arjun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the defense will rise to the occasion. To answer the question, I don't think it is a complicated thing to rise to the occasion this week. I think that Jets offensive line is in a really rough spot right now, and Zach Wilson's pressure to sack rate is not like someone like a Justin Herbert. I think it's 21% right now.
Yeah.
It's a bad offensive line. It's a boomer bust sort of quarterback trying to throw who takes a lot of sacks, who isn't great. So I have Breece Hall gets his touchdown. Garrett Wilson gets his touchdown. That's kind of how I have the 2 touchdowns there. And that's kind of it. Ooh, so, Alex. Yeah, you want to go for it? Or?
Alex in Insdorf in the chat says I would pick the Chargers if they weren't averaging 3 yards a carry in their last 74 runs. That was the factor for him, which is fair.
Which means you get 212 rushing yards this game if you run it 74 times. So 222.
Yeah. For what it's worth, the Jets' run defense is their definite weakness. You have Nick Van Eck coming up. I would love to see more Jordan McFadden. You don't need to be averaging like 6 yards a carry by any means this week, but if they could average like 4, that would be fantastic. And I think that could give them enough. So we're both hopeful that this is more of a Joshua Kelly game, but I think Alex is right. Like it does play into things. Like if the Chargers run offense, I should say, was even just like slightly better, like I'm picking the Chargers to win. But if I had more confidence in where the rushing offense was, I could see them scoring like 20. It wouldn't be like a ton of points by any means without Josh Palmer and Mike Williams, but if the rushing attack was just like slightly more if it was in a groove at all, I think I could see this team putting up 20 points. But without the rushing attack being in the groove, without Josh Palmer, Mike Williams, Gerald Everett's banged up, I think this is going to be a slog of a game, and I think the Chargers come out on top. But I think it's going to be really close and really last minute, like you said, Cameron Dicker field goal kind of situation, or last minute stop on defense kind of thing, and come down to the wire.
I'm hoping the offense continues with understanding their personnel and really what we saw last week against the Bears. I know everyone's like, well, it's just the Bears, but like they're not a bad defense. They've actually been rounding into form and getting better. I hope it's not, well, we're just going to hold on to the ball and throw it deep and run it a ton with Austin Eckler. Like I really, really hope there's some self-scouting that goes on where they understand like we need to lean into the strengths of some of our guys and understand that against the Chiefs, against the Cowboys, we had some good ideas. We scored early, but fell flat in the second half. So how do we fix that in this game? Because, you don't need to go toe-to-toe and throw big punches and uppercuts against Zach Wilson.
Yeah.
Respectfully.
Yeah. Watch, now that we all have a low-scoring game, it's going to be like 30-27.
If you give up 27 points to Zach Wilson, man.
That would be an issue. That would be a problem.
Yeah.
All right, guys. We'll get to some of these questions now. So we'll take questions for about 20 minutes. If you have something that we missed and you want to ask again, feel free and do so. I know Christian Hernandez said that he's done talking about it, but he sent us a $10 super chat, so we got to talk about it. He says, can we now admit that our wide receiver room is not good and the Mike Dub signing set us back for a couple of years? I know I sound like a hater, but it's another year of Keenan and Scrubs. Sorry, he's upset right now. What are your thoughts here?
I don't think that signing Mike Williams necessarily set the Chargers back. What did set them back was not taking a receiver like ever, or continuing to reinvest in the position in some way to find some guys until this year, where of all years to take a receiver in the first round, they did it this year. We were hoping for, even in like the 6th round or 5th round of some drafts, just find the next speed guy, go get the next guy. And they just didn't do that. Of course, the one time they did, Josh Palmer, who was great for the Chargers this season when he was healthy and hopefully comes back pretty soon. So to me, it's not necessarily a Mike Williams signing issue. It's a failing to add to the room consistently over the course of Telesco's tenure.
Just responding to a comment.
Is it a Utah comment?
Yeah.
Oh.
Sholo Man says I should wear my Utah gear for Monday night for some good luck against Zach Wilson.
Sure, I'll buy a USC jersey or UCLA jersey or whatever if it helps.
Yeah.
I'll buy a Washington State jersey if it helps. I don't care.
Yeah. But yeah, like the Chargers didn't have a choice but to re-sign Mike Williams. Like he was coming off the best season of his career. And for all of the criticisms that are definitely valid against Joe Lombardi, like the one thing he did was really elevate Mike Williams' career and prove that he could be more than just like a go ball guy. And I think we are really seeing the effects of not having Mike Williams out there. I mean, the Chargers are losing a huge chunk of their playbook by not having Mike Williams out there. And we've seen some jump ball situations for Quentin and for Josh Palmer, but it's certainly not the same. We've seen some deep over routes, but again, it's certainly not the same. And so I think we're really seeing the effect of not having Mike Williams to this offense. And this year, Kellen Moore had the plans to kind of add to what Joe Lombardi had done, and Mike Williams was going to play in the slot more often. And the slot targets in training camp were awesome to see, the way that they were getting him the football and really expanding his route tree. And now we're unfortunately not getting to see that reality where Mike Williams is healthy, because if he had been able to stay healthy with Justin Herbert and with Kellen Moore, I think Mike Williams and Keenan Allen are both well over 1,200 yards this season. I think both of them would have had huge seasons. Mm-hmm. So I get it. Like, now you're seeing the after effects of it, but it's not, like you mentioned, it's not the signing of Mike Williams that set them back. It was drafting Joe Reed and KJ Hill and cutting them. It was not drafting any receivers after that. No receivers last year. It's not a signing that affects you, because I think you look at these other teams who have these elite receiving cores. It's not that they have their star receivers help, but these teams consistently take bites at the apple when it comes to skill player talent evaluations. And that's how you continually prop up your receiver room. The Chargers have not done that. Obviously, they took 2 receivers this year, but it's a position where you should be drafting somebody every single year, in my opinion. Even if you have 5-6 guys, throw a dart at a 7th round pick and at least take a chance. So, the Mike Williams injury sucks. And if anything, that's really proving his value, because the Chargers receiver room and their passing attack has certainly not been the same. Obviously, there have been some other issues, that Corey Linsley's injury and Justin Herbert's injury. But if anything, Mike Williams being injured should show you how valuable he really was to this passing attack, because it has not been the same since he got injured.
Yeah. Take another receiver next year, please. Keep doing it. Not that the Chiefs have always been successful, but they did come up on Rashee Rice, and they continue to at least try. Not that it always works, but you keep trying. You keep looking for guys.
Yeah. It's very early in the process. I don't think they should take a receiver in the first 2 rounds, but take one in the first 5 and throw a dart and see what happens. Presumably you're moving on from Mike Williams in the offseason. You don't have a ton of money to go find a replacement. So, you're going to have Keenan and Josh Palmer and Quentin and Darius Davis next year, but that's that's not enough. Like, you have to go find ways to prop up that position room. And I think drafting one, late day 2, early day 3 is probably the move there. And as LD Bruin points out, the Chargers haven't drafted a tight end since Hunter Henry. Is that right? Like, I feel like it's been forever.
Oh, receiving tight end.
Yeah.
If you mean receiving tight end, then then Trey McKitty doesn't count. But
yeah. So I get the frustration. The receiving room right now without Mike and Josh Palmer definitely is in a tough spot.
Mm-hmm.
Sholoman, what if we bring Derwin down to linebacker? It sounds fun. I am always a fan of Derwin being around the box more often. Everybody in the chat and online wanted Derwin James to have a simpler role, and I hate it. I cannot stand watching Derwin James 20 yards off the ball anymore. I'm so sick of it. You all clamor for simpler for Derwin James, and you're getting it, and it sucks. So I cannot stand watching Derwin James on film right now, just camping back at the line because the Chargers are terrified of getting beat deep. So you're all getting what you wanted regarding Derwin James, and it's terrible. So congrats. I blame all of you.
It'll probably be a lot like it was against the Cowboys, where he's going to defend the post, and Alan Lazard will not get his, gosh darn it. And then he's gonna, on third down or whatever, go up and cover Conklin one-on-one, and he'll do it very well. And that's probably the role. It's definitely less fun. I think it kind of helps the defense in certain aspects, but definitely not a fun one. Not as fun as it used to be.
No, and we're seeing like one blitz a game. I hate it. I can't stand watching this version of Derwin James.
That part I definitely. Maybe with Alohi coming back, things change, but yeah, you've got a heck of a weapon, and I think like this felt like the year more than any year that he'd be used as a blitzer more and more and more based on what he was doing in training camp, and it hasn't happened. But
yeah, frustrating. I can't stand watching it, but everybody wanted more simple, and that's what they're getting. Okay. Eddie wants to know, what do you think about the Chargers in split backs with Eckler and Spiller? Well, Kelly would be the one to split time with here, but do you think we see any Spiller this week? Since we presumably think the Chargers are maybe running the football a little bit more this week.
Okay, so he had 2 carries last week or 1 carry last week? Let me see. 3 attempts. Wow, amazing.
And a catch, I think, right?
Yes, he did have a catch for 5 yards. So yes, he was a bit more involved. Yeah, okay. Did he get more involved? He definitely had some early stuff, but did he get 2 of his carries when they were already like pulling the?
Yeah, I think he had 3 carries on the last drive, or it might have just been 2, but I know there was at least 2 on the last drive.
I don't know if the Chargers will be able to run enough offensive plays for Spiller to get super involved. I think we're going to get stuck with a couple 3-and-outs, short things, or short drives. So while I think they could run more, I don't think that they'll have enough long drives where you feel like you need to reach into that. But I think it's, 3-4 touches at most.
Yeah, I think that it's very clear that this team has Joshua Kelly a clear step ahead of Isaiah Spiller. So we'll see what happens there. Maybe they focus more on Austin Eckler, the receiver, but I'm not expecting Isaiah Spiller to see a ton of time. LD Bruin pointed us out earlier. Eric Smith had a great breakdown. Special teams will be the difference maker, either Davis and Dicker or Gibson for the Jets. The Jets have a great punter, Thomas Morstead, as well. I didn't read Eric Smith's article, but the Jets are pretty good on special teams. They rank pretty favorably in DVOA. This is a potentially game-changing return man. We've seen week 1, Mr. Gibson had a punt return touchdown that won the Jets the game against the Bills. So special teams, we're both expecting to play a pretty big role. Low scoring game probably means a good amount of punts. Ideally not 27 or whatever it was last week against the Giants combined. But I think J.K. Scott, we'll see a bunch of him, and hopefully this is a good J.K. Scott game. But I think Eric Smith, as always, has a good point here about special teams being a key factor this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it will be. Again, everything counts. Cameron Dicker, absolutely. I feel so much better about this game, having watched him hit the 53-yarder last week.
It's 55 in Kansas City and 53 last week.
That's what it was, yeah. So I feel much, much better about the prospects there. Of course, special teams will always be good, always be dangerous. Dean Leonard is off the injury report.
Yeah, he was
That'll
off
help a
last week.
ton. That'll help a ton. Should be good there. Yeah, I think they'll be just fine.
Yeah, should be fun though. I don't know who the Jets special teams coordinator is, but this is a good special teams battle. If you're into special teams, I think you'll like this one. Herbert Cosio wants to know, would Zont or Vato be the better corner to stay on Garrett Wilson? Would you have that corner put hands on him at the line or play a few yards off?
I think you're going. Oh, well, if the first question, I think you're kind of darned if you do, darned if you don't. Like, it doesn't really matter which one you put on there. I think the biggest difference here is that Asante will get you a pick, or at least could bait Zach Wilson into one of those interceptions. So
yeah,
I think either is it's a bit rough. I know some people really like Asante Samuel Jr. Again, I think he's on pace for 1,300 yards allowed this season. So it's not like it's a whole lot better, but I'll take the game-changing interception over, unfortunately, what Michael Davis has done, which if they're playing him way off, won't get much done. Now, if Michael Davis is obviously the more athletic guy, I just don't think I don't think it's a great matchup for either of them.
Yeah. So one thing that the Jets have done more so in recent weeks is put Garrett Wilson in the slot. It's not a huge thing, but the first 2 weeks when everybody was kind of presumably healthier, he was around 18% of his snaps in the slot. Since that point, it's been around 30%. So it's not a huge number, but it is definitely more of a thing. So the Chargers will likely have all of their cornerbacks go against their Garrett Wilson at some point in this one. I don't feel great about any of their chances of beating Garrett Wilson one-on-one. I think if I have to choose like you, I would probably choose Asante just because he has that bigger play potential. But if there were ever a game where you're going to be double teaming a wide receiver or tight end, like this is it, because Jack Conklin and Alan Lazard, like, please, like, throw the football to them. Like, don't throw it to Garrett Wilson. Like, this is a game where I'm like basically begging to double team Garrett Wilson, because their two weapons on offense are Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. And like, that's it. That is genuinely it of guys that you're like concerned about. So put all the resources towards shutting down those guys. And I think that the Chargers defense will be in a good spot. But if you're one-on-one, at least like I think you take the high upside play and put Asante out there.
Yeah. So Jake was asking, and I was looking this up, who will the receivers Zont and Ja will be up against? Lazard obviously being one of them. And then in the slot has been majority Randall Cobb, who has a whopping 3 catches on 12 targets for 20 yards in the slot. He plays 75% of the time in the slot. So that is Ja Taylor's assignment this week. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I think they're giving Gibson more snaps, but it's not a ton. Like Randall Cobb will still be out there, but yeah, this is presumably a bit of an easier matchup for Ja. So double team Garrett Wilson, please, and you'll have a much better day on defense. Oh man, we got draft debate about Mike Williams going on the chat. I thought you guys were done talking about that.
I don't know.
I saw this thing going around on Twitter too about like draft hits and misses, and like who is really a hit for Tom Telesco and who is a miss. I certainly could be an off-season conversation, but I think a lot of people are projecting their negative feelings on like what exactly qualifies as a draft hit or a draft miss. I understand like Mike Williams is not perfect, but he's a high-end wide receiver too. Like if that's a 7th overall pick, like that's not a miss. It might not be a huge home run hit, but it absolutely is a hit if you get high-end wide receiver 2 production out of a first-round selection. I think people who disagree are very strongly overvaluing or underestimating, I should say, how difficult it is to draft effectively in the NFL.
I think if we did an exercise like that, we'd have to establish what it means to be a hit versus a miss.
Right.
I think there's an aspect where Mike Williams is a hit, but Mike Williams at 7th overall was not worth it. I almost think maybe that's more of a discussion. Like, I think he's a hit as a player. I think if you have as many, well, not as many, but like if when you're healthy, you're as successful as you are, I think what he's done makes him out to be a hit. And frankly, we could look at if you think he's a miss, what are the other two receivers that were drafted around him, like Ross and the other guy whose name I can't remember right now? Who was the other receiver drafted in that same
Corey
top
Davis
10-ish?
and Justin Ross and Mike Williams were like the three that year.
Yeah. That's right. So I think he's a hit. I just debate on whether he's worth it. And then that starts another conversation. Okay, then was he the right player with Mahomes? It's kind of like a slippery slope. But if it's just look at career, look at numbers, hit or miss being you did not contribute anything or you were a complete net negative, then Mike Williams is a hit. But that doesn't mean that he was Rashawn Slater.
Right. There's levels to being a hit or a miss, obviously. But in general, if you're like a borderline Pro Bowl player, like you're a hit. And Mike Williams is not like a surefire elite player, but he's a high-end wide receiver, number 2. I think he had a legitimate Pro Bowl argument in 2021 and in 2019. Mike Williams is a draft hit, like 100%. And talking about Brandon Cooks being a better player than him is ridiculous. Same with Gabe Davis.
I don't know enough about Gabe Davis. Cooks for his career, sure. Not currently. Although Dallas doesn't seem to know he exists sometimes.
No, he does not.
Yeah, and if it's like hit or miss, how much of draft, assignment or slot are we taking there? Like, are you less of one because you were taken in the first round? Again, that's a different debate, I think, like worthiness or value. But if it's just hit or miss, yeah, he's a hit.
Yeah.
I'll go through the misses. Don't get me wrong. We're like, figure out one where there's like the first 3 drafts for Telesco were basically almost all misses.
Yeah. I also think like a lot of people, like there's always this thing about like, if you're not a star, you're a bum. Like somebody was arguing that Alohi Gilman is a miss. And I'm like, he's a reliable safety who's giving you a lot of snaps. Like he was a 6th round pick who was drafted to be a special teams player. Like Alohi Gilman absolutely is a hit. Anyways.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what. I mean, he's up for my expectations. And as a 6th round pick, that's definitely a hit there.
We'll move on here to some other questions, but Alex wants to know thoughts on using Donald Parham more prior to the red zones, even with Gerald Everett playing.
Was he not? I mean,
prior to Everett's injury, we didn't really see a ton of Parham getting involved in between the 20s. He is right that most of his stuff has been in the red zone.
Oh, more prior to the red zone. So in between. Got you.
Yeah.
I see what you mean. Yes, absolutely.
I think this week in particular, like you probably want to use the tight ends more.
Yeah, I think you're looking for players or plays or opportunities where the extremes of what you have are better than just good defense. I think Donald Parham just being really freaking tall is just something that a defense, a play call, talent mostly can't account for. So yeah, I think absolutely.
Yeah, I mean there was that one kind of like corner route that he ran against the Bears, where if Donald Parham is like even 6'6", like he does not catch.
Yeah.
And Justin Herbert placed that ball like literally perfectly. Like it was right in the money spot. And if he's 6'8", you don't catch that pass. Like I don't even think you can throw that pass, but it just gives him a different kind of window. And you can really tell that Justin Herbert trusts him in those key moments. They showed in the All-In episode that they were working on that flea flicker tight end screen thing to get him in space. So it's another thing that I think Kellen Moore like is really starting to figure out how to use Donald Parham more frequently. So I think this is definitely a game where you probably want to lean into the tight ends and just kind of move the ball instead of trying to aim for like the big plays.
Oop, wrong one. What Kellen Moore special do we have this week? What interesting gimmicky thing, whether it works or not, will we see this week?
So we've seen the double pass. We've seen the flea flicker screen. We've seen a reverse. I want to see the speed option. I know it's not like a trick play, but they did a lot of like speed option work in training camp, and we haven't really seen it all that much. specifically, I guess this would qualify for one. They did this like RPO thing where Darius Davis came on an orbit motion behind him, and instead of like the orbit motion being like a bubble screen, the Chargers had it set up where like if Justin had decided to keep it, they would have ran speed option into that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see that play come back because I want Darius Davis to have some creative touches. Jake also pointed out the Hulk package stuff. The 2-point conversion against the Titans where Will Clapp lined up in the slot was hilarious. I would love to see an offensive line kind of pass play again. That would be fun. So Kellen's had some fun stuff this year. He really has.
Let's see. So Rashawn's hurt, unfortunately, so we can't get probably not hurt, but he's not 100%. So you probably don't risk him on.
I think Rashawn will be 100% this week. I think he looked really like himself. There were a couple key moments where I think you could see the ankle still being an issue, but I think this is the week where we see Rashawn really be his former self.
Yeah, I would love to see that. That's a good week to do that. Yeah, big man touchdown maybe. Scott Matlock got to get in there at one point, right? Do we have any former New York Jets on the team? Giants, yeah.
Giants, yes. Jets.
I can't think of one.
I can't think of one off the top of my head.
Just looking for a revenge game play there. Nah. From Eddie, any reason why Fox has been getting so little snaps, so few snaps? I don't know. Is that the answer you're looking for, Eddie? I don't know. Because he gets incentives if he plays a lot of games. The Chargers won't do that.
Well, he gets incentives if he gets a lot of numbers too.
Right.
I don't know. It's strange. Like they're actively giving Austin Johnson the same amount of pass rush snaps as Morgan Fox, and Austin Johnson has 1 pressure on 144 pass rush snaps.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, to Christian's point, there's certainly against the run, sure, I get that, but then like you said, they are almost neck and neck in terms of pass rush snaps, which is I don't get. You want to win some games, you want to have a better defense, and yeah, I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I think even when they've had some injuries at edge rusher in the past, like they've put him out there occasionally, not a ton. So I was surprised too, like when Joey went down and when Chris Rumph was also injured, that it wasn't like he was kicked out somewhat. But yeah, man, I think Morgan Fox, especially against an interior that is suspect, I think Morgan Fox should be playing a lot more.
Yeah, no, he should murder. That should be bloody murder, to be honest. Like that interior ain't great.
Yeah. All right, Tyler. Any other final thoughts before we head out for the evening?
Let's go one last one from Jake, man. Who on the defensive line ends up with the most sacks or pressures this week? Well, if you want to go to Prize Picks, Joey Bosa is at 0.25 sacks. Khalil Mack 0.75 sacks. Ooh. Who ends up with the most pressures or sacks or pressures this week? I think it has to be Morgan Fox. And he's not Dexter Lawrence. But Lawrence, with some of their interior guys healthy, all the Tippmann's coming back, had 15 pressures. So I think that your best pass rushing interior guy will have the most pressures this week, assuming he plays and plays a lot of snaps, I should say.
I'm going with Joey Bosa here. I don't think it'll be Khalil. Mekhi Becton is by far the Jets' best offensive lineman right now. Mm-hmm. And he is a specifically large human being who is generally not susceptible to power rushes, which is what Khalil does. So Khalil lines up mostly against the opposing left tackles. I think that's going to be a bit of a tough matchup for him. Max Mitchell, again, I liked him as a draft prospect. I'm not trusting him to shut out Joey Bosa. So I think Joey Bosa, this is his kind of announcement to the country that, hey, I'm back. I'm still that dude. I think we see a big Joey Bosa game this week, and the Chargers, frankly, need it to happen. So they didn't have a ton of true pass rush snaps this past week. I mentioned this on the Chargers channel. The Jets have the worst third and long distance average in the NFL right now. And so I think the Chargers' defensive recipe for success is very clearly stop the run, get them into 3rd and long situations, and then Joey Bosa and the rest of these cats can really get after it. So the question, can the Chargers defense rise to the occasion? I think depends a lot along this defensive line. And I think Joey Bosa is in store for a huge game. And I think he himself almost makes the answer to this question yes.
Ooh, fun. I certainly didn't love reading all the comments under the Joey Bosa short about, hey, he's bad. He looked really good against the Bears. And everyone's like, well, it's just the Bears. But like, yo, he did well. Like, we can celebrate when guys play well sometimes. So hopefully this will be another game. We can talk about it again. And it'll be like, well, no, they still won't get credit because it's the Jets offensive line, but we're trending in the right direction.
Yeah. Narratives this week are going to be a disaster because we're all expecting a low-scoring game on prime time, which means people are going to shit on Justin Herbert unnecessarily, regardless of the context. And people are not going to care at all about the Chargers defense because the Jets offense is terrible. So national narratives are going to be fun this week.
Yes, and we will give you our narrative right after the game as soon as we can on Monday Night Football.
There we go. Well done.
Thanks.
All right, guys. That's going to do it for us tonight. Appreciate everybody for tuning in live. If you didn't catch us live, like Tyler mentioned, make sure and tune in right after the game on Monday Night Football. Make sure and subscribe, like the show, comment, all that good stuff. Really helps us continue to grow the show. Make sure and use our Prize Picks link to go earn yourself some money. We really appreciate you guys. That's going to do it for us tonight. We'll see you on Monday. As always, Bolt up.